Hey everyone, this is Ryan with This Smart House, and today I'm doing something a little bit differently. Today before dinner, I was scrolling through Reddit and I saw the announcement for the new version of Home Assistant coming out. What caught my interest was they talked about a brand new version of Zwave. So I went through and read the release notes here, and it looked like a pretty large deal of what took place. So they actually released a brand new iteration of Zwave for Home Assistant. And this is a big deal because I've been a long-time Zwave user, and I know it's been pretty stagnant using the current version of OpenZwave. So I was super excited about it. When I got to look at the huge list of everybody who was involved with it, and the fact that they now list that the current implementation of Zwave has been depreciated going forward, I was quite interested. So I thought I'll do something a little bit differently, kind of breaking news, turn around a very quick video and get some information out about what this new version of Zwave is for Home Assistant, and also show you how to set it up and what that setup impact looks like if you have an existing Zwave environment already. So let's go ahead and take a look at the notes from this version of Home Assistant. It is 2012.2.0, the first version of the February release. There are a lot of other things that happen in this particular one, like the difference. They're changing the version of Python from 3.7 to 3.9. But the big change in this version is the new Zwave implementation. So I'll take you through kind of my first impressions of what I think of the new version of Zwave from just reading the notes, and then we'll go into actually how it implements. So if we look over here and kind of scroll down to the integration, it kind of gives a background of what the current state of OpenZwave is, which is a separate platform than what's the version that comes with Home Assistant. Kind of what this new version of Zwave JS actually is. So unlike the current iteration of Zwave, which Home Assistant does all the communication directly with the Z-Stick that you have connected to your system, this one has another layer of abstraction, similar to how something like the SSH implementation works in like Hast.io or Home Assistant now. Basically, there's a outside container that runs and drives your Zwave network. So what that means is if you have to reboot your Home Assistant instance, not the entire host, but your Home Assistant instance, if you reboot it, then that means that your Zwave network stays up. And once Home Assistant comes back up again, it can immediately communicate with all your Zwave devices. And I also assume that means that if you have Z-Wave to Z-Wave communication, like a scene controller, that will continue to function even if Home Assistant is updating or restarting. Obviously, if the supervisor is updating, then that will take down all of your containers. But if you have, say, just a version update or a change to your Home Assistant and it's been rebooting, your Z-Wave network should stay up, and that should make for much, much faster load times going forward with your Home Assistant. The other big note that they say is it's much faster, which I'm really anxious to see because I do notice that my Z-Wave network does lag a little bit, especially when being triggered from another system like my Xiaomi motion sensor. So I'll be super excited to see if it's much, much faster going forward. And you can see this huge list of the developers that were working on it. This was kind of a surprise to the community, I think. I'm not part of the beta, and I don't typically keep up version to version, but this looked like a large change, and it seemed to just kind of come forward out of nowhere. And the fact that it seems to be almost completely implemented is a great bonus. As I stated kind of earlier, it says that the current version of the Zwave implementation or integration is based off the old 1.4 version of OpenZwave, and I've actually had to patch mine for one of my light switches. So when I bought the new Innovelli red switch for my bathroom, it didn't function directly in the current version of Zwave. It came up as an unknown device, and I had a lot of problems. Well, which is based off of OpenZwave 1.4, which doesn't have those newer switches in there. So this will bring the Home Assistant implementation up to date with what's been going on in the OpenZwave community, and allow newer devices to work right out of the box instead of having to add additional files going forward. But as they state here, the old Z-Wave is now being marked as depreciated. So if you do currently run Zwave, you'll probably want to move to this new implementation, Zwave JS, much faster than you would normally, because eventually it will be cut from Home Assistant. But again, they do state a little bit later on, it's not being removed, and there's no plans to remove it. But at some point in time, a Python update could break it. So, and then the Open Zwave, they kind of give a good background of what the Open Zwave integration was. It was based off the 1.6. But because it was being developed by a single developer, unfortunately, he couldn't keep up, and there was a lot of kind of lagging behind. He says he'll continue to work on it, but it would be not a bad idea to go ahead and change over to this version. So it's sort of a fork of the Open Zwave 1.6. Anyway, what does all that mean? Well, all that means is a new implementation, and we need to see, some of the big questions that I had going forward was, great, what's that mean for my current installation of Zwave? Does it mean I have to completely wipe everything and start over again? The good news is that you don't have to. As long as you're okay with the asterisks going forward, the limitations that they have, which are listed right here, as long as you don't have those problems, you can feel free to go ahead and jump ship now and start using the new implementation. So if you don't have garage door controllers, then you should be okay. You can't currently, if you make any actual changes to the Zwave hardware using the Zwave panel, so for changing refresh rates or whatnot, so you can't configure the actual Zwave nodes within the Home Assistant instance. You need to use an outside tool, and they have an MQTT tool here in Zwave JS to MQTT to allow you to actually configure the devices. So I don't really configure my devices. Like, I don't set scenes. I don't change things like to light timing, ramp timing, things like that. Those might need to be done in an outside application, which it's possible, just in another application. The one I'm really concerned about is number 3, the polling, because it's nice to say if you have a light that gets turned off manually, but for some reason the Zwave packet gets dropped, it's good to be able to periodically pull it and say, hey, are you off or on? But it's going to be added in a later release, so I think I can get past that for right now. And again, you can't set configuration parameters and calls, that's fine. And there's no current migration path from the current Zwave implementation over to the new one. As it says here, though, the network is still stored on the stick. All you have to do is it'd be like reinstalling Home Assistant and plugging the stick back in again. Your stick can still communicate with all the devices, but you won't be able to, right out of the box, have all of the names you've set before. So mine's going to have a ton of GE switches, and so I'm going to have to either go through and identify each of those, or what I've done is I've taken some screenshots with the node list, so what I did was went through my Home Assistant configuration file and screenshotted each of the devices with the node number. So I figure I can go back later and correspond node 40 is my bedroom overhead and be able to change those once I implement the new version. So those are all the current limitations. So as long as you're okay with that, I'd say go ahead and jump on board to changing over to this new version. So now that we've finished looking at what it is in the new release, what Zwave JS is, let's look at actually what a migration from the current Zwave integration over to this new one, what that looks like. So I'm going to take you through step by step so I'm doing this on my live instance right now. So we may hit some bumps in the road, but we'll go ahead and take you through that real quick so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so as soon as I saw the announcement come out today, I went ahead and upgraded my version from, I was on 2021.1.5. I went ahead and upgraded to 2021.2.0 and made sure, so as you can see here, I'm on the latest and greatest version of it. So the first thing we have to do, this is always important before you make big changes, is back up your instance. So whether this is taking a snapshot and then copying it off the host to something else, or I like to use the Google Drive backup system, which I have a video coming. It's a short one, so it should be here. I'll link it above when it's finished. But it's very simple to implement. But it's a great way of backing up off-site your Home Assistant instance. So I did that earlier today. So I'll go in here, go to Supervisor, Home Assistant, Google Drive Backup, and then open the web UI. And you'll see here, I went ahead and took one today. It just happened to be the day that mine got backed up. So that means there's a copy of this snapshot on my Home Assistant instance and also in the cloud. Just in case I have to roll back, it's always good to have a spot to go. So make sure you do that first before you get started. The next step would be to remove the current existing integration from Home Assistant so it doesn't conflict. All right, so before we can move away from the depreciated Z-Wave version, which you can see they've already marked it as depreciated right here, we need to actually stop this version and remove it so that we can free up the USB port. So the first thing we need to do is find the name of the USB port in the name of the USB device so that way we can send that to the new version. So to find that, you just go to your supervisor, go to System, under Host, you hit the three dots here, and go to Hardware, and this will list all the devices that are currently attached to it. So what you're looking for is the generalized name is the dev/ttyacm0, but if you can grab the actual name device, this helps if another device gets added. So go ahead and grab the one that says serial by ID. We'll copy that and open up a notepad. Paste that in so we've got that for later. So the two pieces of information we need for that is the serial, the USB device ID, and the network key. So if you've defined a custom network key, go ahead and grab that and make sure you have that available. I don't have a custom network key, so I'm just going to let it generate it for me automatically. So I've got those items. The next thing I want to make sure I grab, and this is just for, I don't know if I'm going to need this necessarily, but I'm going to go ahead and grab my Z-Wave configuration off of my device. So I will go ahead and navigate to my Home Assistant instance via the you can do this via the FTP or I'm using the Samba one. So I went ahead and navigated to it, go into the config directory, and then I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to grab the Z-Wave config XML file. This contains all of the details about my Z-Wave devices, and go ahead and copy that to my local computer here. So I've got a backup of it. I don't think that'll go away because it won't remove it. It just leaves it on the device, but it's good to have that there just as a backup. So now that I've got a backup taken, I have the USB identifier and I have a backup of my Z-Wave network. I'll go ahead and remove the current integration to free up that port. So go back to integrations, go to Z-Wave, and delete it. Okay. So now it says I need to go ahead and restart my Home Assistant. So I'll go ahead and do that real fast to allow it to refresh the instance. All right. So Home Assistant is just finishing up. I'm going to go ahead and go back to integrations and add integration. So now if we type in Z-Wave, we'll see Z-Wave JS is now on the list. So we'll click that. So go ahead and install there. And then it's going to ask you if you want to use the JS Supervisor add-on. Obviously, you'd only not want to use this if you aren't running Home Assistant with Supervisor. So if you're running the Home Assistant core, say running that in a virtual environment on a Linux server or running it like under Windows, you wouldn't have the supervisor then. So if you don't have supervisor listed down here, then obviously you can't do that because it's not running in the Docker containers. But you definitely want to do this because, again, this allows you to have that extra layer of abstraction, which keeps Z-Wave running while Home Assistant restarts. So let's go ahead and grab the serial path. And I did realize I had an extra Z-Wave device that was added by my config.yaml, so I need to remove that from my config, but I'll do that in a minute. So go ahead and click Submit. And it's going to go ahead and scan everything and set up the integration now. Failed to connect. So this happened the last time. And then when I hit close, go back to the supervisor. Z-Wave.js is there. Configuration is set up in here already with the new network key. So we'll go back to integrations and re-add the integration. So it sometimes seems to freak out the first time you do it, but we'll go ahead and do it again, and this will pull that data from the add-on, the supervisor add-on that's already there. Finish. And it found my 39 devices. So very strange. I went through and installed this all once before, and when I did that, I was getting some inconsistent data. I wasn't able to see node information. Now it looks like node information shows up in the Z-Wave info, so that's pretty cool. So if you have issues with the first time you do it, feel free to remove the integration and the add-on under supervisor here go ahead and remove those and re-add them again. And then I also got rid of the Zwave config file that was on my local instance. So we'll go back to the integrations and we'll look again. Because I was noticing my monoprice garage door opener devices were not showing up in the list. And my HA03 lamp modules weren't on there as well. So this is way different. Okay, one of the cool things, if you go to the integration and you click configure, now there is a network management panel here. So you can see which devices, which entities they link to, and this is where you would add and remove nodes from your instance. So, and you can also do it in a dump, which will grab a export of all of your devices and allow you to go through and analyze who their neighbors are, what they're doing. But this is kind of cool. This is showing me right here that it's not ready to go yet. It's still analyzing all the nodes. Actually, if I were to go over here to the supervisor tab and click on the add-on and go to the log, I can watch it step through and query all the nodes on my network and basically ask you who you are, what's your device type, what things do you support, and then be able to identify the missing components from there. So I'm going to let this run for a little while, and then I'll jump back in and we'll see if it did indeed find all of the missing components that weren't the first time. So yeah, the first time those devices weren't showing up correctly, and I was not getting node information, so I wouldn't be able to take those screenshots I took and match them up to the devices to speed up recreation. And then I was missing the, I was flat out wasn't getting my garage door sensors. They were just not showing up. And that was for my first pass through. I also didn't see my, I have a couple of door sensors that I've modified, and those are actually connect to my CO2 and my smoke detectors. I have a relay with those, and that's a later video. And those weren't showing up either. So there was definitely some devices missing. So it looks like now it's scraping back through those devices. So we'll check back here in a little bit and see which devices are found and see if we kind of have 100% of the network, which I would assume it would be because this is a newer version of Zwave. So let's check it out in a minute. All right, so after about an hour of waiting, it looks like it's gotten through a large number of the devices. It's at 27 of 39, and I do have quite a few dead devices in my Zwave stick, devices that I've removed and re-added or had issues with. So that's probably why there's a lot still missing. When I did look back through, it did find the majority of my devices, including my garage tilt sensors. Those both show up now, which is good because those were missing before. I still don't see my lamp modules don't have entities yet, so that could be a bug, or it could have not found them yet. So we'll just go ahead and leave it as is. I'll come back to those later. Those aren't super critical. My wife's not gonna be happy because it's her lamp, but we can get by with turning it on manually until it finishes scanning. So now that you'll still see I have a lot of these nodes that are listed as blank, but when I look back at my list here, I do see a lot of these nodes aren't actually on the list, which means they're probably dead from before. So the next step, what I need to do is really go through and match up each of the nodes in the node information to the list that you have here, and then use that to rename the entities. So for example, I'm going to click into, like, this one's pretty easy, the smart fan control. Well, I only have one of those in my house. That's pretty simple. That's the bedroom fan. So I'm going to go ahead and change the name to bedroom fan. I'm going to change this to MDI fan to get the correct icon. And then I'll go ahead and just change the entity ID. It shows up as a light and not as a fan, which I think in the old Z-Wave implementation, it's fan dot. So not that big of a deal. It's kind of a pain because it treats it like a light. But so I just need to update, I think, just my UI to fix that. So I'm going to change this to light_bedroom fan. So then I'll hit update, and that will change that there. And so now I can turn that on and off and control it just like before. So if we look through the list of devices here, we'll see a lot of these in-wall dimmers. I have a lot of these GE Jasco ones around. So this would be a great candidate for going through each individual one and figuring out which one is which. So this shows up as node ID 12. So I'll go back to my screenshots here, and I'll locate node 12 on the list right here. So that's living room overhead. So I'll just click on this one and change this to living room overhead. And I'll change the icon later. I don't remember what the code is right now off the top of my head, but we'll go to living room overhead. Now these are the 4 can lights that I have in my living room. Actually, real quick, we'll go to MDI icons. Just showing you how this is done, so if you wanted to go back later and find it. You can search on this website for any of the different light the icons you want, and then you can just apply those later. So like this one's probably a good, it's a wall sconce, but it still kind of looks like an overhead light. So I'll just click on that and then grab the name, copy it, head back over here to configuration, and then we just got to do MDI colon and that name, and it'll pull down that one. So I'll go ahead and hit update, and then there we go. That's the living room overhead. So I'll just step through each of these one at a time, and also update the name of the actual device and add it to an area. That way when I look at my list, oh, and then yeah, it gives you the option to go ahead and if you rename the parent device, it'll rename the sub devices, but I don't need to do that right now, so I'll let know on that. And so it shows up as living room overhead. So when I click back and go to here, it will no longer say in-wall dimmer, it says living room overhead. So that's easier to find in the future. This door window sensor, this is node ID 17. So looking at the list here, that's the garage entry sensor. So this is the door sensor I have on my garage door. So I'm gonna go ahead and click up here and change the name to garage entry. And this would be garage. And this is of course gonna rename all the sub devices. So now it's just called garage entry any. And then I can go in here and change this to binary sensor garage entry door. And then MDI door. All right, so there we go. So that's a garage entry door, it's off. Now, if I wanted to come in here and customize even further, I could use the customize interface, change this from a generic binary sensor to a door. So actually, I'll do that real quick. Go to configuration, customization, right here. Oops, sorry, too far down. And then we'll do binary sensor, garage door. So here's the garage entry door. We've already changed the icon, but if we go here to device class, we can change that to door. And then what that will update is instead of saying on off, it'll say open closed. So again, you'll have to go through and customize this because it doesn't really know which device sits where. So you'll have to customize that for each and every device as you have it in there. So if I go back to the garage entry door, we'll see it says closed now instead of open, or off, sorry. And then, so I'll do all these later. I don't need to do these in the video. Yeah, so then I would step through each of these devices, check the node number, take your screenshots you take earlier, then you can rename them and have them ready to go. So there you go. Looks like it's fully implemented and ready to go. So there you go. Now you see the new features that come with the new Zwave JS. You've seen some of the limitations that are in the current version, and then you've also seen what it looks like to migrate your Zwave instance over to Zwave JS. So you've seen kind of what it looks like after everything gets refreshed. And I think for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and stick with this current iteration, and we'll dig through and see if there's any other issues or any long-standing problems that I can then pass on to the developer team to take a look at. But so far, I'm pretty happy with the new implementation. It seems a lot faster. I like the new interface. It's a lot less cumbersome than the old Z-Wave was. You had to dig into the logs every time you wanted to do anything. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm excited to see what new features that it can bring going forward. All right, so I know this was kind of a different video. I recorded it just the night that saw that announcement and decided to play with it. So if this is something you want to see me do more of, kind of the late-breaking, quick analysis of the new versions, just let me know in the comments. I might try to do this for some of the major releases. I don't really have time to do like the Home Assistant podcast where they analyze every single release. So, but if you'd like to see more of this stuff, just please let me know in the comments. Of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That means a lot. It makes it very kind of encourages me to continue making new videos. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If it was boring to you, then give it a thumbs down. In the links below the description, you'll see links to all the devices I use, links to Amazon. If you want to support the channel, there's a link down below to buy me a beer. If you'd like to do that, no pressure. Again, thanks for joining us this week, and have a great day.